The Galactic Council had made a grave miscalculation. Ambassador Zethkari of the Ethereal Collective stared at the holographic display with growing horror, his translucent tentacles trembling as data streams cascaded across the crystalline interface. The humans had been gone for exactly 73 standard cycles since the Great Betrayal, when every civilized species in the galaxy had united to cast them out from their homeworld. Earth had burned for weeks under orbital bombardment. Its blue skies turned to ash, its vast oceans boiled away. It was supposed to have been the end of humanity's story. Impossible, whispered High Arbiter Velnash, her chitinous exoskeleton clicking nervously. The scans must be corrupted. Humans were a primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel. Zethkari wished he could agree, but the evidence was undeniable. The deep space monitoring stations had detected them first, massive ships moving through the void with impossible stealth technology. Ships that bore no resemblance to the crude vessels humanity had possessed during their brief membership in the galactic civilization. These new constructs were nightmares of engineering, black metal twisted into forms that seemed to bend light itself, covered in configurations that hurt to perceive directly. Where did they acquire such technology? Demanded General Crexton, his forearms gesturing aggressively at the display. The Vraxian military commander had personally led the bombardment of Earth, taking pride in humanity's extinction. Who would dare trade with the outcasts? The answer came from the darkest corners of space, transmitted on frequencies that shouldn't have existed. The message was simple, delivered in perfect galactic standard by a voice that carried the weight of absolute conviction. We learned from the best teachers in the universe: pain, abandonment, and the endless cold between stars. Thank you for the education. Captain Sarah Chen, though that name belonged to a life 73 years dead, stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound, watching the feeds from across the galaxy. Her body bore the modifications that had kept her alive through decades of exile: cybernetic implants that regulated her aging, neural interfaces that connected her directly to her ship's quantum processors, and genetic alterations that let her survive in environments that would liquefy most carbon-based life. She was no longer entirely human, and neither were the millions who had fled Earth in the desperate evacuation. They had become something else in the darkness, something that had learned to thrive where others would die. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Torres, his own modifications gleaming silver beneath artificial skin. "All fleets are in position. The Collective's core worlds are defenseless." Chen nodded, remembering the day they had begged for sanctuary and been refused. The Galactic Council had deemed humanity too violent, too unpredictable for civilized space. They had painted Earth's children as monsters who would corrupt the peace that had reigned for millennia. They had been wrong about humanity's nature then. They were about to discover how right they could become. "Execute Protocol 7, Chen commanded." Across 17 star systems, humanity's exile fleet emerged from hyperspace with surgical precision. They had learned much in their wandering: how to mask their heat signatures using captured void wraith technology, how to phase shift their hulls using principles stolen from the quantum architects, how to weaponize dark matter itself using research abandoned by species too ethical to pursue it. The Council species had grown soft in their peace, their military technologies stagnant, their warriors trained only for ceremonial display. Humanity had spent 73 years becoming the thing that hunted between stars, perfecting the art of war in the depths of space, where mercy was a luxury no one could afford. The Ethereal Collective's capital world of Nethes fell in 6 hours. The Vraxian fortress moon of Kordak lasted 3. The High Arbiter's homeworld managed 2 days, but only because the humans wanted to broadcast their surrender across the galaxy. But humanity didn't want surrender. They wanted something far more valuable: understanding. Ambassador Zethkari found himself face to face with Captain Chen aboard his own flagship, somehow transported through shields and armor that should have been impenetrable. She looked human still, but her eyes held depths that spoke of decades staring into the abyss. "You cast us out because you thought we were monsters," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that registered on multiple spectrums. You were terrified of what we might become if we learned your technologies, gained your knowledge. Zethkari's form rippled with terror. Please, we can negotiate. We're not here to conquer, Chen interrupted. We're here to teach. You wanted us to be monsters? Congratulations. But monsters, you see, make excellent teachers about the nature of fear. The holographic displays throughout the ship flickered, showing feeds from across the galaxy. Humanity's Auhe. Ships hung in orbit above every major world, silent and waiting. No shots fired, no demands made, just presence and the terrible knowledge of what they had become. We learned something important in our exile, Chen continued. Peace isn't the absence of violence, it's the presence of those strong enough to enforce it. You created us to be your nightmares, so we'll be your guardians instead. She smiled, and Zethkari realized that humanity hadn't returned seeking revenge. They had returned as something worse, as the very darkness the galaxy now needed to keep more terrible things at bay. Welcome to the new galactic order, Chen said. Sleep well, knowing that monsters are watching over you. In the end, the Galactic Council discovered that betraying humanity hadn't destroyed them. It had forged them into exactly what the universe required. The stars themselves seemed to pulse with approval, as humanity took their place not as conquerors, but as the patient guardians of a galaxy that had made them into its own salvation. The nightmare had become the shepherd, and the flock would never know how safe they truly were.